Hello, how you doing? And welcome back to the channel. What a game. Leinster against La Rochelle in the Champions Cup final. The game that the competition needed. The game that had all the hype and lived up to its billing. One of the great finals of the Champions Cup, of the Heineken Cup. And La Rochelle beating Leinster in Ireland, in Dublin, by 1 point, having come back from 17-0 down. That's what I'm talking about in this video. Drop a comment down below. Let me know what you made of this game. I thought it was, from a neutral's perspective, absolutely unbelievable. From a Leinster perspective, absolutely gutting. And I guess another season where they don't have any silverware despite being such an incredible rugby team. And they showed that in this game. So there's so much to get into. I'm so excited. The game's just finished. Drop a comment down below, like the video and subscribe to the channel as well. But let's get into it. So I'm pretty sure I said in my preview of the final, and in fact my preview of the semi-finals as well, was that the Champions Cup needed a great game, and we hadn't had it. The pool stages were a mess. The knockout stages were okay, but still hadn't, I thought, had that really gripping, intense drama. And this final just delivered in spades, in bucket loads. It was absolutely brilliant. It was exactly the sort of match that the competition needed. And they delivered two absolutely brilliant teams. As I say, from Leinster, and I'll get onto this more after I've kind of gone through the game, where do they go from here? I'm really intrigued of what the Leinster fans in the comments down below are going to say now, because their side are so good, but they haven't won anything again. And let's start with how good Leinster are, because we'll get on to La Rochelle, who are slowly building, potentially, we'll wait and see, into one of the great European teams. But Leinster 17-0 up inside the first 12 minutes. And I was watching on BT Sport in the UK, and Austin Healy said on commentary that it was almost the best rugby he'd ever seen. And that kind of sums up Leinster in a way, I think. When they are clicking, when they are on their game, they are incredible to watch. And I don't think there's anyone that can actually compete with them. But it was only for that first, 20 minutes, 25 minutes maybe of that game. And then La Rochelle started to come back into it. Because even though Leinster, in a scoreboard sense, dominated the first half, if you look at the stats at halftime of the amount of carries, the amount of ball that La Rochelle had, they had a lot more of the ball, the French team. Leinster were having to get through a lot of defensive work, and the defending champions were able to work their way back into the game. The other area that Leinster clearly targeted was the breakdown, because it was an absolute mess in the first half, and that's exactly what Leinster wanted to do. They were piling in, they were putting pressure on La Rochelle, and the French team couldn't really get kind of any grip in the game. Leinster were brilliant. And the defence as well, I mean, they looked so fired up. This looked like the kind of game, particularly after the defeat to Munster in the semi-final last week. It looked like a Leinster side in the opening half hour or so that had an intensity about them, that knew their season all came down to this and they had to deliver. And they were excellent. But then they kind of faded away. And I don't really know exactly why that is. I think in the second half, Jaco Piper, the referee, I wonder whether La Rochelle might have said something to him, in all honesty, in terms of the breakdown and his officiating there, because there were some suspect decisions going on in the first half. I wonder if they highlighted his attention on that and whether he officiated it a little bit differently. But La Rochelle were able to get their way back into the game, and it set up just an unbelievable second half. Just the tension, the amount of opportunities that La Rochelle actually had, and it almost got to a stage where I was thinking, they've got to take one of these. They have to score, because they'd had so much of the ball. They had so many phases in the Leinster 22, and they each time weren't quite able to get over the line. They were coughing the ball up. They were knocking it on. Leinster at times had some absolutely brilliant turnovers, but eventually they got the try from close range. They knocked over the conversion, and that gave them a 1 point lead. There were cards. There was a red card late on for Alan Alatoa as well. But yeah, just incredible game, I thought. One of the best games of rugby I've seen for a long, long time. But we have to look at this from the Leinster perspective of the second year in a row where they don't have silverware. And obviously they made a lot of changes for the semi-final of the URC, obviously keeping an eye on this final. A lot of their big name players came back in for this game. But again, I think Leo Cullen, Stuart Lancaster, a lot of those coaches have got to look at themselves to a degree for what happened in the URC semi-finals. Is it as much of their fault today? I don't know. Leinster proved that they are capable of beating anyone. We know that. And they just seem to fade in this match. Now, two sides to every story. La Rochelle obviously were brilliant and were able to grow into the game, and in terms of the scrum, the driving maul at the line-out was absolutely brilliant and really helped them get a foothold back in the game. But I just think from a Leinster point of view, if I was a Leinster fan, I'd be looking at this game and I'm thinking we're 17-0 up after 11 or 12 minutes. We have a decent lead at half-time, although La Rochelle had started to chip away at it in the second part of the first half. But then just only scoring, 9 points in the second half, not scoring another try. How have we let that game slip away from us? And I'll be pretty disappointed if I'm a Leinster fan. I think it's within their rights to expect more from their team. And any of you who are fans of basketball in the NBA might have seen recently when the Milwaukee Bucks got knocked out of the first round of the playoffs. Giannis Antetokounmpo, their superstar, one of the best players in the league, got asked if it was a failure, and he had a really good answer on that. It's not a failure, it's just part of a growing process in sport. I'd encourage you to try and find it, because it was quite a good context in terms of how professional sports people view failure. And it's not failure in the way that we see it, but I do think it gets to a point when everything is in your favour in terms of, if you're a Leinster point of view, it's a brilliantly run club. They have an incredible talent pathway. They're packed through of talent in their team. They've shown in this game how good they can perform in terms of their structures and what they can do on both sides of the ball. They're well coached. It gets to a point where it is a failure, isn't it? I think this season has to be viewed as a failure because they are good enough to win 2 competitions. And again, they've come up short. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to reading your comments from the Leinster fans. I know how passionate a fan base it is. And I just think that the coaches deserve criticism here. I think the players deserve criticism for the way in which they weren't able to really land much of a punch, particularly in that second half. But anyway, let's get on to La Rochelle, because Ronan O'Gara continues to do a brilliant job there. I mean, the physicality they bring and the hits in this game from both sides was ridiculous, was so entertaining, was so enthralling. It just drew you in. Will Skelton is one of the best forwards in the world. What he gives you in that team in terms of just how big he is, the physicality he brings, and that driving maul for La Rochelle, I think you could say really got them back into the game, because they were struggling in a lot of areas of the pitch, but they were able to have that weapon, and that helped drag them back into this match, and they've now gone back to back. And the way I think about it is, you remember when Toulouse won their final against La Rochelle, wasn't it? I think a couple of years ago. And a lot of people thought, well, this is the new age of Toulouse. They're going to be what Toulon were when Toulon won 3 championships in a row. And we've also thought before that Leinster, every single year, you think Leinster are going to win it, Leinster are going to win it. Again, a lot of people would have picked them to win this game. I thought they would win this game, actually, because I thought the home advantage would perhaps just sway it in their favour. But La Rochelle have come in and done maybe what we expected teams like Leinster and Toulouse to have done, to have gone back to back, to be that consistent powerhouse in Europe. This is their 3rd final in a row. They've now won 2 of them. They are an incredibly difficult team to beat. It's a brilliant place by all accounts to go and watch them play. If you go and watch them in their stadium, it sells out all the time. The atmosphere is brilliant. It's a small town, but the public there are so behind that team. I think they are great for the game and great for the competition at the moment. And again, next year, it's going to be who can knock them off their perch. So huge credit to La Rochelle. Ronan O'Gara's stock as a coach is only going to increase. I mean, there isn't really anyone, is there, as a player who is more synonymous with the Heineken Cup than Ronan O'Gara, I would argue. And then he's continuing to do that as a coach. He finds ways to win. I would have been so intrigued to know what he said to his team at halftime in that dressing room when they'd been so much on the back foot. But as I've said, huge credit to them. So this is kind of my on the whistle thoughts. Some of them probably not quite as well put together as I would like usually, but it's kind of full whistle's gone. I wanted to get a video up and just my thought process. And the big thing, I suppose, really, the big question is the Leinster fans, this season is a failure now, isn't it? Surely. I know you'll go into the World Cup, and I think Ireland is still brilliantly placed in that World Cup. You look at Munster in the final of the URC, you look at how good Leinster are. I think that's the thing that I'm struggling to get a grip with, really, is we saw how good Leinster were. They were quite literally unplayable with those 3 quick tries they scored. And then they fell away. And as I've said already, a part of that's to do with La Rochelle, and huge credit to the French team. But I just think when you're as good as Leinster are, you need to be able to have more of an answer. And to have no silverware again, in my opinion, this season is a failure. But anyway, drop your comment down below. That's enough of my ramblings. If you can like the video and subscribe as well, I'd massively, massively appreciate it. But as always, I will see you in the next one.